Today's guest is a bit different from the usual mental health professionals and attorneys. Joel is a former debate coach, and he also he has a business called Dow Bloom. There he is. Joel, don't do anything. Let me see if I could get you on here properly. Who need to decide what to do with their lives. And he does not have it here. I think this is going to work. Yes, good. I see you. Okay.
Mhm.
So I know I'm telling everybody that I had when we met, I told you about what I do, and you're like, oh, I don't have any experience with divorce. That's fine, but just know that this audience has a lot of kids who are being brainwashed by the other side, and I feel like it's so important to help develop kids' critical thinking skills when it comes to their lives as well as what they want to do for their future. And so when I met you, I thought you are an expert in this, and so we should talk about it. So before you even introduce yourself, Joel, how common is it for kids to not know what they're doing in general with their lives? Let's say like teenagers.
Yeah, well, I think you can just reflect on the people that you know, the kids you know, the people in your life or yourself, because for almost everyone, what you're doing with your life right now is not what you thought you'd be doing when you were 5 or 10 or even 20 or 25. I mean, the most common thing is that people change their career several times, change their major several times. You know, even when you're a little kid, maybe you want to be an archaeologist or a dinosaur tamer or something. And ideas get sort of refined over time, but along that process, because kids don't have a whole lot of guidance or sort of vision for their long-term future, it's really normal for people to waste years, maybe decades of their life, not sort of actualizing their career potential. And then when it comes to college, obviously it's a ton of money. And then just psychologically, when you don't really know where you're heading in life or where you stand in the world, it can cause a lot of stress and anxiety. And having some solid goal to move towards really orients yourself in the world, like who are you, what is this life, your life about, what does it mean? And I think most kids don't have it, which is why it's a big passion of mine to try to help especially teenagers to develop some idea of where they're moving towards in life.
Yeah, and I think it's so important too because for the people in this community, we are often completely distracted by what we're dealing with in the legal system. So when you mentioned how kids don't have guidance, this community even, I would imagine, lacks the kids lack more guidance because their parents are just so consumed by other things. So before we keep talking, Joel, why don't you formally introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So my name is Joel Mounts. I've had I guess my education has been a mix of something, conventional and sort of unconventional. I was homeschooled as a kid until until ninth grade, until high school, which was my first sort of real exposure to um, how much time that we waste in education system generally. You know, I'm talking public education, but I spent a lot of time in private education as well. And a lot of private schools can be better, but they're not a ton better, you know? So that was my first experience of ninth grade. The biggest takeaway was just like, we're wasting so much time here. We're not really doing a whole lot. Like in homeschool, the general model was that I'd be learning a lot by myself. You know, my
Mhm.
mom would give me a math textbook and I'd read the math textbook, do the problems, and that would be that. And when you have some kind of a goal that you're aiming towards in life, I think that kind of intrinsic motivation to make progress by yourself can make things much more efficient. You can get way more done. You can make way more progress in life. So after that, I went to school for pre med. I wanted to be a doctor. And that was another stage where I ended up, like a lot of people, just wasting a lot of years not doing something that was moving my life forward. Because I worked in a hospital for a little bit during college. I ended up talking to some doctors, doing some research, and figuring out, okay, I didn't want to be a science researcher or a doctor, but by that point, I was so far into my degree that I just had to get the degree, and that was that. So that's where I ended up going over to Asia to just do something different, something sort of adventurous. I got into teaching, and that was sort of something I fell in love with for an 8 year on the ground teaching career. 3 years in China, 5 years in Taiwan, which is how I got into debate, which has been the bulk of my career sort of since then. And yeah, I really love debate because it is this powerful tool, especially for kids that have a lot of potential. Maybe they're precocious, they're smart, but they don't have a real outlet to express their intellectual talent. Again, this is a really common thing for kids, that they're just bored in school.
Mhm.
That they just don't see, why are they there? What are they spending their time, doing in school exactly? What kind of futures is headed for? It can be bad, I think, normally, that students don't have a clear idea of where they're going, because they don't know, what school should I apply to, and why, and what major should I choose, and who should I talk to, and is this adult that I just met, are they going to be able to answer certain questions, and am I going to be able to ask those questions? Um, those can, for almost all students, that can be an issue, but I think especially for smart kids, there's just a lot of wasted potential when they're just bored in school all day, right? So debate gives them some kind of an outlet to do, to really apply, research skills, again, critical thinking skills, writing, speech giving, which I think is just so huge, especially for maybe Gen Z or Gen Alpha kids who famously have maybe some communication issues, right? So to have some kind of outlet, like, I always recommend people do choir, maybe, or debate.
Really?
Just of course, yeah, just somewhere where you can find your voice and be confident, literally in the embodiment of your voice, right? Um, which is a huge part of your personality, but also just a huge part of your who you are as a person socially, right? How people perceive you, how people look at you. So, yeah, the research backs us up really well. I'm really, really, really into debate. But my experience being homeschooled and going through high school and going through college, and switching this career and then finding education, um, made me kind of zoom out and take a look at this bigger issue, which is just the lack of direction kids have generally. And
Mhm.
what you're saying is, for a lot of your clients or audience, um, the kids are really in the midst of a lot of really intense chaos, and don't have a whole lot of grounding, um,
Yep.
in their life or their school. So what I see in normal, students with happy families and no issues, is also a crisis. I don't see wasting years of your life and hundreds of thousands of dollars, and failing to live up to the potential that every child has to have a beautiful life, and to change the world, and to make the world a better place. I don't see that as that status quo that we have as a non-issue. I think that's a huge issue, but I think potentially for some of your audience, it's a much, much bigger issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about my son in particular, who was also a national debate champion. A lot of things you say, he was bored in school. And by the way, a lot of people in our community do homeschool. We have a huge number of
Hmm.
homeschooling clients, but I never thought of it the way you're saying it, which is that people can go at their own pace. My son was really bored in school. Um, complained that everything was too slow, even when it was really sped up. Like in fourth grade, they were giving him SAT testing exercises, and he still like flew through that.
Hmm.
And I think he resents me for not putting him in some kind of special school, but I
Sure.
didn't, I didn't know, and I was a public school teacher too. So,
Well, and
you're
to
thinking
be
right.
fair to you as a mom, that not a lot of those schools even exist.
Yeah.
Good private schools, again, they do a much better job. But there's not a whole lot of schools I would say, okay, this is an ideal model of the school. They exist, but there's not many of them out there at all.
Yeah.
So,
And I also think it's really interesting what you said about finding one's voice, because I think that doesn't just apply to kids in this community. Many adults in this community have lost their voice. When we talk about doing choir, I think about the power of singing and also getting one's voice back.
mm.
And even debate for adult. I don't know if there's debate for adults, but I know that debate for kids is something that we recommend all of the time in terms of developing critical thinking skills. Can you talk a little bit about how debate specifically helps a teenager, let's say, really develop critical thinking skills?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in almost all kinds of debate, there are two sides, right? And a good topic selection will be a topic that really does have two different viewpoints that you could potentially, take a view on, right? So, should we massively build out high-speed rail in America? There's some pros to that. There's some cons to that, right? That might be a good topic. To what degree should the U.S. be involved in NATO? Should it have a much more extreme investment? That could be a topic, one or the other. Organic farming, should we massively increase that? There could be some benefits, some downsides. So these topics, are specially chosen to have things where you can argue both sides. And what
Mhm.
students need to do is they need to argue both sides. So let's say that you're a huge, huge fan of organic farming and you think every farm in America should be converted into organic farming. Fine, cool. In this debate or in this activity, you have to embody the other side, to understand their arguments, to research their arguments, and to argue their arguments in a debate round. Um, the style I teach has 7 different topics a year, so it gives students a really broad range of knowledge for policy and for different countries, different international events. It's called public forum. It's the most common style in America. So if your school has a debate club, they likely have a program for doing that.
Mhm.
But along the way, you're given this topic, and you have to the process to become good at debating involves a ton of research. That's the first thing. And a lot of that is really matters what the quality of the evidence is. So that's going to be a very early stage in any of these topics. Is this a good source? Is it biased? How is it biased? Let's say it's the only source you can find. Like, can we still trust it? So you get into these really minute details about how trustworthy a source is, like who the author is, where they're from, what their credentials are,
Mhm.
and then just the logical piece. Maybe this is just a journalist who's a college student. They don't have many credentials, but actually logically, it's a really really good argument. So it's sort of piecing out those things as well. Um, that's I think a really really huge step when you ask about like how can we know what's true in the world? How can we know what we can trust? That very first basic layer of debate, which is really important, I think, does a lot of that heavy lifting, just figuring out what you can trust, what you can't
Yeah, like
trust.
and a lot of analysis. So again, in my mind, I'm applying this to family dynamics where sometimes one parent is putting messages into another child into the child's head about the other parent, like making the child pause and be like, wait a second, let me analyze. Like, can I
Mm.
trust this source? Why would they be saying things like this, et cetera? But it's great.
Yeah, and it is kind of a muscle that you exercise. So the more that you do that, the more your brain will naturally do that. If you're, for example, a lawyer and that's your job all day, you're going to be able to like very instantly recognize, okay, is this nonsense? Is this not nonsense?
Mhm.
What kind of point of view is this coming from? So yeah, that research part is really huge. But then the next stage would be putting your arguments together. So you have all of these facts. How do you turn that into a story? How do you turn that into something to actually persuade a judge? Right? Because maybe you believe something in your heart, maybe you feel it, but it's a very different thing to be able to bring someone over to your side to convince
Mhm.
them that your feelings are legitimate, that they're backed up by facts and data to some degree, and to be able to tell your story well. So even if they don't agree with you, at least you can feel comfortable. You've communicated yourself well.
Yeah, and I guess sorry to keep interrupting you, Joe, but I
No,
keep
no.
thinking about the parallels with what we teach our clients in terms of the art of persuasion. Like, what does it take to put together a strong argument without emotions? Because
Hmm.
you got to look at the facts.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Again, here I feel a little bit lost in being able to relate to kids that going
Good,
through messy
good.
divorces. But
No, no, Joel, that's okay. I don't want you to relate.
okay, okay. I mean, I really think these skills are just cross applicable to anywhere you go. Which I
Yeah,
think is the real power of it. That learning to do research, to write, to communicate, and even to do this competitive sport where there's this aspect of winning and losing, of reading the judge because each judge is different. So how do you kind of figure out like what are they really into, and how do you sort of make small talk and just like make people like you generally? Um,
yeah.
these
Lots of
skills, like
parallels here.
there is no area of your life that I can possibly imagine where those would not be useful skills.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking about establishing credibility. In general, we always say to our clients, we want people to like you so that they believe you.
Hmm.
So how do you
Yeah,
do that?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah. It's a
So
huge first step.
as you're saying this, let me ask you about, so we've talked about putting an argument together. How important do you think tone and body language is when it comes to making a persuasive argument?
So imagine this: you're going out to a networking event, right? A little cocktail party, or you're going to the bar to try to make some new friends. You live in a new city, something like this, and you see someone you want to go to talk to, and you're thinking, how can I approach this person so that they'll like me? Would it be better if your vibes were really right and they kind of just trusted your, the way that you carry yourself, the way that you approach them, the way that you look, the way that other people are looking at you, but you say something crazy, or the opposite, right? You say you've planned very exactly in your head exactly what to say. You pull out a notepad from your pocket and read it to them. Obviously the first one is going to work. When you approach a stranger 9 times out of 10, it doesn't even matter what you say. It matters how your energy is and how you approach them. So I would say it depends on what you're talking about, but in general, far more important, especially for those initial stages of building a relationship. Far more important how you come off, how you present yourself, your energy, versus the actual words that you say.
Yeah. So that actually matches something called the 7-38-55% rule by, I don't know if you've heard of Chris Voss. Is a former FBI hostage negotiator. And he wrote a book called Never Split the Difference that's all about the art of negotiation. And so we teach a lot of information from that, but he talks about how people really just listen to 7% of your words. 38% is your tone and 55% is your body language. That's exactly what you said. It's like 93% is your vibes and your energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, again, just back to this example. If I go up to at a cocktail party and there's some guy I want to talk to and I say, how was your breakfast? Or what do you have for breakfast this morning? Or say, whatever, the weather's crazy. Or say, you've got a great suit. Or like, and none of this matters. I can say anything I want. I can say, hey, man, I just had an interview today, on Instagram Live I can say anything I want. As long as my
Mhm.
tone's fine, it doesn't even matter. Like the rest of
Mhm.
it is I was going to say 90-10, but 93-7, yeah, sounds about right.
Okay. Cool. All right. So let's move to the whole career path thing, especially for kids who don't
Yeah.
have guidance, who think that things have to be a certain way. What are some myths or misconceptions about for teenagers specifically about their future?
Yeah. So I had
For
a
example,
list of this. Where can I find them?
college is a default. We all assume, even as we're putting together parenting plans, that the kids are going to go to college, right? So that's your option. You graduate high school and you go to college.
Yes.
Is that something that you see most kids should be doing? It sounds like maybe not, based on what you said a little while ago.
Yeah, so this is a huge conversation. I'm certainly not anti-college. In fact, I think if you have a good plan, college is probably a great fit for a lot of people. But I mean, you can look at the societal attitudes towards college that are changing over time. It seems like the value of the college degree is degrading over time as um, employment rates for college grads go down compared to um, people without college degrees. So a big sell of college is okay, you'll find a job. Seems like statistically that's not true, right? It
Mm.
doesn't really necessarily help you a whole lot. There is the big component of on average you make more money, and there are some confounding variables there, like probably you're more high class if you have the time and money to go to college, right? So
Hmm.
it's a little bit unclear, like is college really doing the lifting here, or is it just your parents read a lot of books to you as a kid, some other of these confounds. Um, and then all of the maybe the resurgence in trades, which is as I've become more interested in finding good career paths for kids, I've also started to ask like almost everyone I meet, is this a good career for kids to get into? Is there a shortage? And this is something that every tradesperson I talk to has confirmed. Like, yeah, there is definitely a lack of workers of the trades. Um, and so, obviously, for those, you definitely need education, as far as maybe an apprenticeship or some kind of a tech school, but you don't need college. So these are some of the societal trends that we're seeing. Um, Also, just the fact that AI seems to be eating into so many different career fields and shifting our world so radically and so quickly. And colleges oftentimes are these sort of ossified beasts that don't change very quickly. Like maybe the textbook, a marketing textbook that you're using was written, 5 years ago, which sounds recent, but it's not. Like everything
Mm.
has changed in marketing in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And especially if the college professor, maybe they worked in a company 20 years ago and they've just been teaching for 20 years, they don't know that things have been updated. They're not a practitioner in the field. And I'm not saying that this is the case for every degree, but for a lot of degrees. So these are just some of the kind of big picture things I'm thinking about for college.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, again, I don't think it's a bad thing to do, The only thing is, I think you need a why for why you're going to college and a really strong why. So, a really common question that people ask high school students is like, where are you going to go to college? What are you going to major in? Where are you, what do you want to do with that? Even once you get into college, okay, you're studying business. What do you want to do with that? What are your business ideas? These kind of like stock questions that we ask to high school and college students. And putting yourself in the shoes of one of those students, you don't want to come off as ignorant or like you haven't thought about this. So a lot of students will just say something, right? And to some degree that will even maybe become part of their identity. Like I want to study communications because I want to do PR, but
Mhm.
like have you talked to people who are doing PR? Have you done communications before? So having some kind of a plan where like this is definitely what I want to do. This is the project I want to work on. This is the issue I want to solve. Can make everything in college much more worthwhile. So the biggest example I think of, because I was a heavy science major, is research,
Mhm.
right? So let's say that you want to study chemistry. There's probably 1,000 different problems that chemistry can solve that we haven't solved yet. So if you pick, for example, like inventing a novel drug, to cure your least favorite disease, something that you just want to, nix out of there. There's already researchers working on that, right? That just like any of those kind of problem areas you can think of. There are researchers actively working on that. They all have emails available online. You can just email them all for free while you're
Mhm.
in high school and talk to them, and they'll love to talk to you. Because people love to give advice to kids. So you can talk to all of the biggest researchers in the field for 15 minutes, get their advice on what you should be focusing on in school, what kind of projects you can do. So talk about being bored in school. If you have this kind of a goal where you're like, I want to study chemistry for this reason, and these are my mentors, and this is what they say I should do. Now math makes sense as something that you should pay attention to and get really good at, right? Now
Mm,
writing
yeah.
a chemistry class obviously makes a lot of sense. Biology might tie into that. English class, there's like a communications aspect where you can write papers about these things, do research about these things, talk to your teacher. Hey, teacher, I don't really want to do this book assignment. I've got this passion. Here's the reason. Can I do this instead? You have all of these things where your whole life starts to make sense in a much more cohesive way, rather than these kind of vague ideas of like, I want to be a doctor because people say I should be a doctor or something like that. So
Yeah. Oh
that's
my gosh.
really where I
Makes
see those
so much
those
sense.
values of those real long term goals.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really makes so much sense just in terms of people who are rudderless, not just teenagers, but families, but at least if they have these specific goals and they have these free things they can do, like think about who your mentors might be that you don't even know yet, who could give you some guidance in terms of what to study and that you can do this yourself. You don't have to wait for somebody to do this for you and you don't have to wait for any period of time to pass before you do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. What are
Yeah.
what are any other methods that you use with kids when you work with them on this?
So, it's easy for me to just say this is what you should do. You should find this, you should figure out something maybe you potentially want to do, right? And get specific about it. And then find those people, contact those people, have those phone calls, take notes, put together a plan. But the fact is, for a lot of high school students, like they don't know how to do any of those things, right?
Right.
Like how do you find who the expert in that field is? Like how do you send them an email? A lot of people are really you know, this is not how I am, but a lot of people are really shy about writing emails. Especially kids that they haven't done this before. Like sending a cold email is kind of intimidating to them. And so
How would
like
they, who would teach them? If their parents are
exactly,
busy, who's going to teach them how to
they're
do
not
that?
getting that in school. Like their career counselor has no time for it.
Right.
Parents aren't thinking about it. So like just like guiding them through these little steps. I think is the big thing. A really big thing is the phone calls because like everyone's terrified of phone calls. So even like being on the line with them during that call, putting together some questions beforehand, just giving them some encouragement, and so sort of giving them all of these steps and guiding them through like very personally how to do all of these things, and then slowly, backing up so that they can develop these skills by themselves. If you've already sent 4 emails with my help, you can probably send the fifth one by yourself.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking, forget phone calls. What about Zoom meetings? Now people are so easy to reach to just have like face-to-face conversations. And in my head, because I do
Yeah.
interviews, like why not teach your kids basically interview questions on what you want to find out from these people and then see their faces?
Yes. Yes. So the cold, like I guess I think about everything just in terms of baby steps, right? Like you got to do step one before you can do step two. And but I also think of like the grand plan because some students are not shy at all, right? So like what advice do I give to students who maybe are already sort of some level up here? And right now, because I do marketing like professionally, and I think what is the biggest way to get the most attention, the most efficient way? It turns out it's what a lot of kids want to do anyway, which is TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Uh, and so I think it's easy for a lot of student parents or teachers to say, my kid is spending too much time on TikTok or YouTube, or, they want to be a YouTuber and that's kind of dumb. I think this idea is probably disappearing pretty quickly, but my take would be like, if possible, let's just harness that. Let's use that obsession, as unhealthy it is, to bring it up to something really more productive.
Hmm.
So here's an example that this enterprise of coaching students is new enough that I haven't had a student go through 5 years doing something like this. But this is kind of like my dream vision that again take it back to someone who wants to do some organic chemistry in order to solve some kind of disease, and let's say they're 16, right? And they can do cold emails, they can get people on phone calls, and then yeah, that would be the next step, is doing a video call, and then doing a podcast. Maybe something like we're doing right now. You can
Hmm.
publish it. You can do that once a week. You'll start to develop sort of a fan base of maybe other like cancer researchers, maybe people far more advanced than you, but you're doing these interviews with them. You get the practice of social media. It's like a real legitimate skill. You get career advice, through all these interviews. You build up a huge connection. You're thinking if you're doing one every week from the time that you're 16 till you graduate college, that's like 300 people that you've had long conversations with, like 300 career professionals that you have like these deep conversations with. You're doing them a favor because a lot of these researchers can't talk about, they don't have a whole lot of outlets to talk about their kind of their nerdy
Right.
interests. And so like by the time that you graduate college, you're not just like, well, you don't just have a good network and a ton of knowledge and are really good at it. You're probably one of the most trusted experts in this field.
I
By the
love
time you
this.
Before you go into your PhD program, you're one of the most trusted experts in your field. Now, this is just one example. This could apply to a lot of different things, but I think these kind of like long-term projects that, again, this wouldn't take much time. So take 2 hours a week, you know,
Hmm.
these long-term projects with a really, really high payoff is what I think of as like the ultimate goal for a lot of these students, where you're you have this real focus that you can build these big long-term projects in these areas where like no one's doing these things. Like no one in your school, no one your age is going to be doing this thing. You will have the biggest competitive advantage, more than I could even possibly imagine, compared to all of your peers. And yeah, hopefully just really do good things to change the world.
Yeah, so inspiring. I mean, it's really harnessing a nugget of a kid's curiosity about something and blowing their world up with ideas of like where they could take that interest rather than I've got this vague notion that maybe someday. It makes it more real and more attainable.
And it is real and it is attainable. Um,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of kids just need a little bit of guidance and yeah, a little bit of help thinking outside the box.
So speaking of that, Joel, how can people find you?
Well, you can shoot me an email, joel at daobloom.io. That's DAO Bloom, BLOOM.io, joel at daobloom.io. And we can set up a meeting. I'm trying to have as many conversations as possible, do a little bit of pro bono work, put together little plans, a little strategy session, give whatever advice I can. And I've done this for dozens of students, and I'm gonna hopefully do it for hundreds more this year. It's a really exciting process. So shoot me an email and let's talk.
Yeah, it really is. I can't wait to tell a number of our clients about this interview who have teenagers and they are going crazy, especially with all of the time spent on devices, that maybe that this could be something to start, again, developing ideas and turning it into more than just wasting time.
Sure, sure. And one final thing, just like sort of a freebie, like even if you don't end up emailing me, something I just really recommend to everyone. This is something I did with a family friend recently. He's a kid who's 12. He's wanted to be a pilot for probably like 3 years at this point, and he's never talked to a pilot. So, this is okay because he's my family friend, but this is any parent can do this. I took him to the airport, I haven't talked to 10 pilots. He's like on top of the world, like super inspired, got a lot of really good practical advice. And again, compared to other 12-year-olds who want to be a pilot, he's now like legitimately made some progress in his career. you
That's
know so
amazing.
so I recommend, like, if your kid has any kind of an idea, like, at least try to do that, like at least try to talk to some professionals in the field as early as possible. And it could be that they find out some information and think, hey, I don't want to do that. Great, that is an excellent result. Like, now they can move on to their next dream, their next thought, and they've learned something, and they don't
Yeah.
have to, again, waste the next 3 years just not having the information that they could have otherwise. So
Yeah.
that's the one piece of free advice everyone should take.
Yes. Well, that's so helpful. Well, Joel, I knew this was going to be inspiring and really helpful, and I'm so happy that you agreed to do it.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This has been really, really beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. So my pleasure, and we will stay in touch.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay,
Okay.
bye bye.
Bye.